Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. I'm sure that everyone's familiar with the tragedy that happened to Miss Loletha Hall. In 2024, she would be accosted, threatened, and murdered by a geriatric killer, William Brock. The excuse that he used was that he said some scammers were trying to get money from him, and he was sure that Miss Hall was one of the scammers. She wasn't. But instead of contacting police, he decided that he would kill her instead because white privilege. He was so confident that white privilege was good enough to enable him to kill with impunity that he shot Miss Hall 6 times, killing her dead. He chased her around her own car, gun in hand, and then murdered her. And then afterwards, because all racists are cowards, he lied and claimed that he was afraid for his life. He had seen so many white cops and just white civilians on the street like Kyle Rittenhouse and others use that same lie, and they saw as judges and prosecutors in the white media gave them a wink and a nod, and he figured, well, hell, that'll go for me too. After all, I'm an old white racist, so they're going to go ahead and let me off the hook. He was wrong in this case. William Brock was convicted and charged on 3 counts of murder and single counts of felonious assault and kidnapping. This crime happened in Ohio, which is a cesspool of white supremacists, and that includes the so-called authorities. On the day this piece of trash was set to be sentenced, his defense attorney tried one last pathetic ploy to try to hold off the inevitable by, quote-unquote, collapsing in court. This ridiculous bit of judicial theater didn't fool anyone, but the judge decided, hey, it's a Friday, so let's go ahead and take a 3-day weekend. We'll come back on Monday for sentencing. His lawyer had been throwing everything against the wall, filing motions for a new trial, for an acquittal, which, as you'll see, he had good reason to think that would be successful. Because the only behavior in the court more disgusting than the defense attorney was the judge.
The defendant's aggregate prison term will be 21 years to life in prison. Again, the court has no discretion to increase that or decrease it in any way. That is the statutory penalty for these offenses. I really don't believe he would be a flight risk. I don't believe he would be a danger to the community. But it's my confidence in the record of this case that the conviction will be upheld. Certainly been wrong about that before. But that's the factor I'm relying on most of all. And so again, if the Court of Appeals sees it differently, if they think there's a viable appellate issue, then they can issue an appeals bond. Okay.
Now, this bastard's name is Judge Douglas Rastatter. He essentially gave the lowest possible sentence that he could under the law, as he complained and whined about. The law basically tells him what the sentence has to be. He has no discretion. He also has no decency either. But that's what he decided to do, 21 years, because it was the least that he could do, the very least. 21 years to life. But even this scumbag Rastatter had to admit that there were no procedural violations. He was looking at this and going, well, guys, he was dead to rights. There really was an open and shut case here, and that being the case, he's not really going to have any grounds for it other than just hope that these white appellate judges are on code. Then the old I'm white and I say so kicks in, and it doesn't matter what the actual letter or spirit of the law is. White privilege is the totality of the law. He was apologizing for this animal having been convicted, and then in open court said that this murderer wasn't a threat to the community.
I really don't believe he would be a flight risk. I don't believe he would be a danger to the community.
He committed murder, didn't he? He had just been convicted of it. I've been saying since at least 2013 that we also have to make it a point to know who the hell these judges are, and to also remember that they must be punished when they decide that they're going to be committing all sorts of crimes on the bench. There need to be consequences for judges who are undermining and derailing the course of justice. This animal was just convicted of murder in his courtroom, the sentence was clear, and the judge was whining that the law refused to allow him any leeway to the sentence. He was agonizing and apologizing to the scumbag in question in court because, well, the law didn't give him any leeway to just give him probation, which is what he really wanted. He was openly sympathizing with a convicted murderer. in front of the family of the deceased. And had it not been for the law making it mandatory what the sentence should be, he would have done what Aaron Persky did with Brock Turner and what Robert Adrian did with Drew Clinton and say, why, we can't ruin this old man's life. Well, whatever's left of it. Give him probation. I'm sure he's sorry. After all, he's no threat to the community. He doesn't pose a threat. You had a judge complaining that he had to sentence a murderer to prison. This was an anti-black racist declaring his support for violence in the name of white supremacy. And the prosecutor wasn't any better. He showed everyone he wasn't even really trying to get this animal punished, because it was that prosecutor who said in open court, both families have lost loved ones because of this, and there are no winners here. He also followed up by saying after the verdict, the really sad part about this is that we know that the scammers, the folks who started this, haven't been brought to justice, and hopefully one day the FBI will bring these folks and we'll be able to prosecute them right here in Clark County for what they did. He was declaring to the whole world, the real sad part here wasn't that Loletha Hall was murdered in cold blood. Her death, that's not the sad part. The sad part is that whoever the scammers were, we don't know who they are. So Loletha Hall, well, hell, she just got what she had coming. That's what the bastard was saying. And there are idiots out there who are going to let him have a pass. This guy should not be anywhere near a courtroom. He should be in a cage right alongside his hero, William Brock. The scammers weren't the ones who killed anyone. The scammers were not the ones who held anybody at gunpoint. The scammers were not the ones who killed someone and then lied afterwards. The race killer William Brock, he's the one who's guilty. He's the one who actually committed the crime. As far as the scammers went, if this guy had decided that he was going to act like a decent human being, which would have been beyond him, of course, then there would have been no problem that day. What would have happened is Loletha Hall would have gone home, the scammers would have gotten nothing, and that would have been the end of that. All of these people on the white right claiming, oh, don't you know that we are the most law-abiding segment of society? Yeah, look at all that law-abiding that he did. The prosecutor had more to say about the scammers who didn't kill anyone than he did for this wrinkled-up racist scumbag who murdered an innocent woman. So both the judge and the prosecutor were talking like they were part of the defense team, which is exactly what they are. They understand full well exactly what the rules of racism are and that their job is to make sure that the law does not touch those who are classified as white. If you're classified as white, you cannot have any of your rights infringed upon, even if you violate the law. The prosecutor and the judge understood that their job was to make sure that if you kill a black person, well, if you're classified as white and you kill a black person, that's not a crime. Those are the rules of racism, which the white media, the police, the prosecutors, the judges, and these so-called lawmakers are all well aware of. So to bring charges against a white person for killing a black person, that is way off code. And to convict them is even more off code. And to have to sentence them, why, that's the most off-code thing of all. So as white supremacists, they all want to let the rest of the racists know that, well, we didn't want to do any of this. We didn't want to bring charges, didn't want to prosecute, definitely did not want to have to sentence them. But the laws that we wrote to ensnare black people, well, in this case, we wound up getting one of our own, and we're really sorry for that. But you know what? We can at least tell all of these niggers, you got the better of us on this one. You know, we were caught in a web of our own making, but you know, this man, he was no threat to society. He didn't do anything wrong. So this was supposed to be a prosecutor who wanted a conviction? And this is supposed to be a fair and impartial judge? The behavior of these two scumbags is a scandal in and of itself, and both of them should have been dragged before the State Bar Disciplinary Committee for suspension in the case of the prosecutor and disbarment for that judge with charges afterwards. Complaining in open court about the very laws that you're sworn to uphold? That's got to be a violation of some sort. At least it would be if this judge was black. Remember the uproar from the white right and the white media when they found out that it was a black judge who correctly gave two teenagers probation after they were accused of getting into a fight with two of Elon Musk's little science experiments, or wherever the hell they are. Even Elon Musk himself was on the internet whining about it. But there was absolutely no reason for Elon Musk or anyone else to complain, because probation was the appropriate sentence as established by white judges, not just in D.C., but across the country. If the Elon Musks and the other white supremacist trash want to be mad, they should have been mad at their own white judges for making this the norm. But of course, it wasn't about the sentence. It was about who the accused was and who the accusers were. That's supposed to be what actually determines who gets what sentence, or who even gets charged. Black people are supposed to be the ones who see white assailants either given probation for assaults and even murders, or in many cases, not get charged at all, which almost happened in the case of Daniel Penny. To the dominant society, that's what's supposed to happen. That's what reassures them. But when a black person is accused of harming a white person, that's supposed to have an automatic maximum penalty, and you wouldn't see any judges or prosecutors complaining about that. You know, my advice to Elon Musk and the rest of the whiners on the white right would be, he and Big Balls and the rest of that gang of degenerates need to get a thicker skin. They need to stop whining so much. Bad stuff happens to people regardless, and when it does, you don't need to be commiserating and complaining. You need to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and you need to not let something that didn't kill you just get you down. Besides, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right? All of this whining is unworthy of adults. But then again, Elon Musk is not an adult. He's the world's most dangerous child. But that little inbred reprobate also needs to take his own advice. Get a thicker skin. Better yet, just get over it. After all, it's not the end of the world, right? This is the alleged prosecutor here we're talking about, and he's saying that the family of this animal who were not hurt at all, and for all we know, probably enabled this degenerate, that apparently we need to be sympathetic towards them. Well, did the family of William Brock condemn him for his crimes? Did they condemn him for murdering an unarmed innocent woman? I haven't heard a peep from them, so they can't be victims when they weren't harmed. And if they were innocent, then why shouldn't they be glad this animal's off the streets? Because he would have harmed them, wouldn't he? So, if they are decent people, they should be expressing remorse to the family of Lolita Hall for what their relative did. And they should also be in front of the cameras expressing relief that this piece of dirt is in a cage where it belongs. They should be apologizing to the family of Lolita Hall. They should be in front of the family with tears running down their face, begging the family's forgiveness. But the prosecutor wanted to make it clear that he didn't want to have to prosecute this case. That's what he was doing. This was his chance. I'm trying to distance myself from this. He was apologizing, is what he was doing, apologizing to the other white racists out there. I wanted to give him a plea deal, or no time, but there were too many people watching. There were headlines that were just too prominent. There were too many people who were monitoring this. There was no way that we could bury this one. We couldn't do the old white privilege two-step. So I had to take it to trial, and then the eyes still didn't go away. The pressure was on, and I couldn't get rid of it. I didn't want to have to take this to trial. I didn't want to prosecute the guy. But I tried to get rid of it, but it just didn't work. For this scumbag to make a remark like that reminds us all of another courtroom piece of trash, former judge and current criminal defendant James Gosnell, who presided over the Dylan Roof trial and who also wanted to make a public statement of support for the racial murder that criminal committed.
There are victims on this young man's side of the family. Nobody would have ever thrown them into the whirlwind of events that they are being thrown into. We must find it in our heart at some point in time, not only to help those that are victims, but to also help his family as well.
So the disgusting display that the judge and the prosecutor put on in this case was not some one-off. This is standard operating procedure when these racial crimes against black Americans occurs. Sympathizing with the killers and then offering that animal bail. That's what happened in the Dylan Roof trial. For a mass murder, there's not supposed to be bail whatsoever. But these are white supremacists who were trying to show that they were fighting the race war in the courtroom. They wanted to make it crystal clear exactly whose side they were on. This is why the murder of Loletha Hall happened, and why the Mother Emanuel Church massacre happened, and all of these other race massacres because of racist degenerates like these two so-called judges and this prosecutor. They are part and parcel to these crimes. They act as accessories to murder after the fact. That's how they should be considered because that's what they are. William Brock is also facing a civil lawsuit for wrongful death filed by the family of the Hall estate. So whatever belongings this scumbag has, whatever he owns, the family should get every single bit of it. He should be left with nothing. He should just have to sit there in prison and watch as whatever he thought he had gets taken away. Keep the screws on this piece of trash. But understand something. This kind of stuff is deliberate. It is systematic. When Mr. John White protected his family from a gang who had assaulted his son and then came to his home to terrorize his family, he was railroaded into prison with no sympathy from prosecutors or the judge, and he didn't do anything wrong. The racists who are in these prosecutors' offices and on these judges' benches, they have an open, blatant policy of railroading black people who protect themselves from white racial violence. but also to make sure to refuse to prosecute the perpetrators of anti-black violence. They recognize full well that their actual job is to make sure to maintain the color-coded injustice system of America. Their job is to make sure that black citizens get prosecuted whether they did anything or not, and to make sure that white offenders are never touched at all. Because you've never seen a white judge agonizing and apologizing in court because he had to sentence a black defendant to prison for killing a white person, and complaining that, well, the law requires that the sentence be so and so. You never see them complaining about that. Hell, they're proud of it, beating their chest like Tarzan. And this is why we need an anti-black hate crime law specifically for us. One that not only enacts punishments for the perpetrators of anti-black violence, but one that also recognizes the racial reality of these bigoted prosecutors and judges who sympathize with these killers and do everything that they can to give lowball sentences to these criminals. Every single judge in America must be subject to review and scrutiny of their records to make sure that they are actually handling things objectively. There has to be a mechanism in place to make sure that you can punish these judges when they are clearly giving black defendants the harshest sentences and that they're giving non-black defendants a slap on the wrist. When you can consistently see this, that's not supposed to be treated as, it just worked out that way. You're supposed to be able to point to that and say, okay, we found a problem right here. If you're the same judge interpreting the same laws, handing down the same sentences, there should be no disparity. And the fact that there is a disparity, that is the proof of racial bias. And if you're in court giving sympathy and giving your support to the killers who commit anti-black violence, that right there is supposed to be a hate crime in and of itself. When a judge is on the bench and that's what they're doing, they are committing a crime not merely against society, but against the concept of justice itself. We have to teach these racists that committing anti-black violence, or sympathizing or otherwise supporting it and misusing your position to protect these animals, that's not some freebie, and that there are penalties that go along with it. These are the individuals who are just as guilty and just as responsible for these crimes as the trash who pull the triggers. They operate as support staff in a race war against black citizens, and vermin like Dylan Roof and William Brock are part of the irregular forces of white supremacy. They are the non-uniformed scumbags who run around committing racial ambushes. There's not much solace to be taken away from this. Loletha Hall should still be alive, but at least these white supremacists were forced to take an L. They hate it, it eats them alive, and that's why they act out in court the way that they do. Because they're no different and no better than the Dylan Roofs and William Brocks, and it's understood by them and the society they come from that their entire job is to maintain the two-tiered injustice system, the racial immunity from law that white privilege requires in order to function. And if mass murderers and casual killers can go to prison, then so can these judges. That's what former Judge Gosnell found out the hard way. He went from openly advocating for a race killer to now looking at winding up just like his fellow white racist William Brock. You see, Gosnell's also an elderly white racist too. Any sentence he gets, if it's a just one, would amount to a life sentence for him too. He's hoping that at some point his racial immunity from law will kick in. But as the L's begin to add up, and as we remember who these animals are who give sympathy to the devil, the chances of the scum getting away with it will also become less and less. And for them to see their white privilege and racial guarantees crumble right in front of them, and to know that it's black people who took it all away from them, well, that is justice. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Sabrina Scott, Ikegas Dorset, Jacques Hargett, Reasonable Dude, and Samora Morris. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.